Hello folks. Well, this is a little bit different video than what you're used to from me, and it's just due to an experience I just had recently. There are two magazines that I'm sure you've heard of. The one is the National Enquirer, and the other is the Globe. When I saw an ad in the Globe looking for a unique movie star story, I decided to approach them about my chance meeting with Johnny Carson of The Tonight Show fame. Well, I picked the Globe first to contact since they're here in Iowa, and so am I. They turned me down without even seeing the pictures because they told me that they didn't think many people would actually know who Johnny Carson was, and that he was too old. Well, he's one of my idols, and I ain't that old. At 64, I have a friend who still lives just to the south of his old house in Malibu, and I remember looking at that house and felt sad when he died. So I've decided to make public the pictures and the story here in this very short video, and hope you enjoy this. Well, in my lifetime, I've actually met some people who I really have admired. All were famous in some way or the other. A few I met were in order, like John Simone. He was a national helicopter champion and the first person to actually loop an RC helicopter. He owned with his dad the first American radio control helicopter factory known as American RC Helicopters. Well, John asked me to fly the RC F-16 jets in the movie Blue Thunder. Blue Thunder was the nickname of the super sophisticated helicopter that was flown by Roy Scheider in that movie. Well, I met Roy very briefly, and it was quite an honor. He was also the sheriff in the movie Jaws, if you remember. Well, after that, I met Mike Moss. He was the first person to do an inverted landing with a gas helicopter and also a tail boom stand. He was a national helicopter champion also, who actually went on to publish his own helicopter magazine called Rotary Modeler, and I've graced those pages a few times myself. There were no computers or internet or anything back then, so I began writing hard articles for the model airplane magazines. When I designed and wrote an article in Model Aviation on how to add half rate switches to any RC transmitter, I was asked to go to work for the famous Phil Craft, who I was very honored to meet. Phil Craft was also a national RC champion with airplanes and had formed his own Craft RC systems. Phil was always known as the father of digital proportional RC radios, and many folks still have those gold behemoths. When the imports showed up, he was actually forced to close down. It was sad. But during the cleanup, he gave me his original pull-in proportional radio, which you may have seen in some of my videos. I have since passed it on to the Radio Control Hall of Fame, where you can read my whole story on that, and actually about how Phil Craft gave it to me. Well, like I said, I have met some inspirational people for sure. One was the Commandant of the Marine Corps. That was General Leonard Chapman. I met him in Vietnam in 1969 when he was touring an orphanage in China Beach. It was really an honor to meet and talk to somebody so much more powerful and higher ranked than I was. Well, at this point, I had gotten involved with the USMC Marine Air Reserves at MCAS Tustin, California, managing the CH-53 avionics division for the helicopters. It was there that I met Colonel Jordan, who liked my idea when I approached him to have an RC model air show for Toys for Tots. He liked the idea so much, and being quite an amazing person that he is, and also an honor to meet, he managed to fly Santa in a Goodyear blimp and have two celebrities attend also. Well, at this first show, there were two famous people, Pat Sajak and Kelly Lang. Pat was the NBC weatherman in LA, who is now the Wheel of Fortune star. He's pretty funny and a neat man for sure, and he sure liked our RC motorcycles, which we had there too. Then there was Kelly Lang. She at the time was the Southern California NBC News anchor. I watched the news every day and both of them, so it was an honor to meet them. The show was taped and then played live on the NBC Sunday show. I have a tape of her interviewing me while I nervously flew my Byron Pitts on national TV. You can see the video of it in one of my archives if you want. Well, this RC Toys for Tots air show was the first of its kind, and it's now being done by many RC clubs around. I was honored by the AMA for my idea, and I'm happy it went off. A lot of kids got toys. Well, after that, I met Dennis Rodman, who used to come into our shop in Newport Beach frequently. I once tried to take pictures of him, but he blocked out the camera and said, "No, man." He had the worst looking black Mercedes with flames on yellow and orange on the hood, and it was an old four-door, not an SL or anything. Pretty wild guy. Another person who really inspired me was Chun Park. When I developed the Hyperfly concept, I visited his company in Poway. Well, Hi-Tech RCD was the company, and I wanted to see if he had a single-stick 3-channel radio. At the time, he did not. His company was fairly new in the RC business at the time, and I watched him grow into one of the biggest RC radio manufacturers in the world, and he's also now the CEO of Multiplex RC Systems in Europe. I remember back in the day I had put a Weed Eater engine on a scooter, and just about everybody I knew rode it. One day when we were flying at Camp Pendleton, Chun and his dad showed up and he rode it too. He rode it at his shop. Everybody liked that scooter. Well, Chun was instrumental in getting me the meeting with Aki Suzuki of Kyosho to present my no-tail rotor design, which they did purchase from me and turned it into a big success, especially in the Far East. So it was an honor to meet you, Chun. I was really honored when the San Diego Aerospace Museum curator asked for Hyperfly for its history of model aviation display. Well, I took it down to San Diego, and I flew it for the curator and the spectators. They were pretty amazed to see how well it flew with only 2 channels and no tail rotor. Well, it was quite an honor for me to meet Ray Crowell, the curator of the museum. I never met a guy that was so meticulous in his work, and it's very evident there at the museum, so if you get a chance, go down and take a look. But the person that I met by chance was my all-time favorite, Johnny Carson. You know, the Globe and the Inquirer said no one would remember who he was. But, you know, I disagree. If you ever watched him on The Tonight Show on NBC, or heard your folks talk about him, or other relatives, make a note below and, you know, be honest about it. I'd like to know. I'd be curious if you know who he was. So here's how I met him. One late afternoon in 1985, I had just finished with a client in Burbank, California, and was beginning the long, slow drive home in rush hour traffic to my home in San Juan Capistrano. Well, I didn't mind too much, though, as I had a good day, was driving my brand new Cadillac with a phone, also a very inexpensive toy at the time compared to today. While I was turning left and waiting to get on the Santa Monica Freeway, I was sitting under the overpass waiting for the light. There are 2 lanes there, and I was in the right lane. Everybody was stopped. I had my window down about 6 inches and looked over to the left of me and immediately noticed a green Mercedes SL right next to me that was occupied Johnny Carson and a Lexus. I think he married her a couple of years later and was his 4th wife. Well, people who have seen his car would recognize his car right away, especially with that antenna on the deck lid. And I just simply and boldly and matter-of-factly said, Johnny Carson. They both looked over at me and smiled. I said, I am so pleased to meet you. I watch your show every single night and sure like to talk to you about an electric helicopter. Well, he seemed intrigued and said, call the studio and tell them what you want to do. Well, just then the light changed, and as you can see from picture 1, he was still in the left lane as we entered the freeway. Well, here's a sidebar. You see, back then we were experimenting with RC electric helicopters, and I had successfully invented a no-tail helicopter, and I was trying to figure out how to show it to the world. So for that reason, I wanted to introduce Johnny to something new in the RC world, hopefully on his show. Well, that never happened, as there was a model magazine blitz of advertising and sales took off and didn't need to go. Once on the freeway, I pushed the caddy around him to his left so I could get a picture of him driving. As you can see from picture number 2, I did. It also seems he must have been tired, bored, or asleep at the wheel because he yawned just as I snapped the picture while passing by. I was in no position and had no other option to get another picture. It was a great moment for me to actually have him speak to me in this totally perchance encounter. I feared maybe the Tonight Show must have been keeping him up too late, though, as I've heard he stayed up late to watch his own shows afterwards. And maybe that's why I was yawning here on the freeway. Now, I really miss him. It was a great show. Rest in peace, Johnny. Well, thanks a lot for watching my video about Johnny Carson and how I met him and a few other people. So, Semper Fi, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks kindly. I still think a lot of people know who Johnny Carson was.